When the HOA showed up at my door with a pile of paperwork demanding to seize my family's ranch, I thought, no way in hell. They thought they could scare me with legal threats. They thought a few pieces of paper could erase 80 years of my grandfather's blood and sweat. But they were wrong. This wasn't just a fight over a piece of land. This was a battle for dignity, for memory, and truth. Follow the no-holds-barred showdown between a greedy HOA and one man who refused to kneel before injustice. I remember that moment like it happened just this morning. The sun was scorching and the wind whipped up thin layers of dust on the dirt road leading into the ranch. I was inspecting the fence when I heard a car stop behind me. Turning around, I saw a whole convoy, over a dozen people, all dressed in matching polo shirts and khaki pants, like they were about to shoot a real estate commercial, lined up on my driveway. Leading them was Curtis Doyle, the new president of the Willow Creek HOA, a short, stocky man, his face beet red like it was about to explode, with the eyes of someone who was used to giving orders without ever being questioned. Curtis marched, straight up and slammed a thick stack of papers onto the hood of my old pickup truck. "Sign it!" he barked, his voice booming across the yard like a summer thunderclap. "Your grandfather's ranch? It belongs to the HOA now? And that house you're living in? Same thing." I stood frozen, staring at the papers as if they had sprouted from the dirt itself. This land had been in my family for over 70 years. It had survived storms, droughts, economic crashes, times when many other farms around here had been abandoned. It wasn't just a piece of land. It was memory, flesh, and history. Everything left behind by the man who raised me. And now, a bunch of strangers standing on my ancestors' land, dressed neatly and waving legal jargon around, dared to demand it like they were asking for leftover pizza at a party. Curtis slammed his hand on the papers again, growling, "You have 72 hours to sign. If not, we'll proceed with forced removal." The board members behind him nodded in unison like a row of bobblehead dolls. I clenched my fists, feeling my blood boiling under my skin. But I forced myself to stay calm. I turned my head toward the old house behind me, the sun-faded white paint, the creaky windmill atop the well, and the weathered American flag flapping proudly on the porch. There was no way I was losing this place. Not that easily. Just as I opened my mouth to protest, a shiny black SUV screeched to a halt behind the group. A man in a black suit stepped out, carrying a clipboard, sunglasses, hiding his face like he'd just walked off the set of a B-grade spy movie. "Are you the owner of this property?" he barked. I barely nodded before he shoved another stack of papers into my chest. "You've been served." I stood there, stunned. Served? What had I done wrong? I flipped through the papers, full of legal jargon, property seizure, HOA ownership rights, violations, penalties. Each line felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Then I saw the line that made my knees almost buckle. "If you do not vacate, you will be forcibly removed." Looking up, I saw Curtis Doyle stepping closer, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Well, kid, sign the papers nicely or get dragged out like some squatter." The stench of stale coffee and cigarettes on his breath hit my face. I gritted my teeth. Just then, from the side, a woman, Valerie, the HOA secretary, sauntered up, her voice syrupy sweet and poisonous. "We'd be happy to help you relocate, Mr. Luke. There are some lovely little homes in the new development, of course subject to board approval." Her tone sounded like she was inviting me to a buffet, not robbing my family's legacy. I stared hard at Curtis, then at the crowd behind him. I remembered what my grandfather used to say, "No one can take your land as long as you're still standing on it." I took a deep breath and said exactly one word. "No." The crowd erupted. Curtis's eyes bulged, and he roared like I had just insulted a god. "You'll regret this," he spat. Right then, the man in the suit yanked out his phone and barked into it, "Initiate Phase 1. The rumble of heavy machinery echoed down the dirt road. I turned around, and my heart clenched. A fleet of bulldozers, cranes, and cement trucks were roaring straight toward the ranch gate. Dust clouds billowed into the sky. The ground trembled under my boots. The HOA wasn't just threatening anymore. They were ready to crush everything to get what they wanted. And me? I was alone. One man, one rusty old gate, and a will that would not break. But I swore. By everything, my grandfather left me, they won't take this land so easily. I don't even remember how I sprinted to the ranch gate. All I knew was that my heart was pounding like a war drum. Dust billowed into thick clouds behind the approaching bulldozers. Their steel buckets, as wide as barn doors, were pointed straight at the ranch gate, the only thing standing between them and my home. I gripped the old iron chain my grandfather had always used to lock the gate when he was alive. "When a bad storm comes, lock the gate, stand your ground, and never back down," he once said. Well, this was the storm he had warned me about. The lead bulldozer rumbled to a stop a few meters in front of me. Its engine howled, belching black smoke into the air. The driver, a hefty guy wearing a sun-bleached ball cap, glared down at me with thinly veiled contempt, like I was just a fly buzzing in his path. He revved the engine, nudging the bulldozer forward, slamming the steel bucket against the gate, making the chain groan and shriek under the pressure. I instinctively stepped back, but then held my ground, staring down that massive wall of steel trying to tear through my family's memories, efforts, and very soul. From behind, Curtis Doyle's voice rang out, thick with mockery. "Open the gate! Luke, don't be stubborn! You can't win this!" I turned and shouted back, "This is private property! You have no right to break in!" Curtis scoffed, waving that fake stack of papers high in the air. "We have every right! The HOA made its decision." I clenched my fists, pulled my phone from my pocket, and immediately dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice came on. "911, what's your emergency?" I yelled over the roar of the bulldozers. "There's an illegal trespass and threat to property at 1745 Willow Creek Lane. A convoy of construction vehicles is trying to force their way through my gate." The dispatcher's tone sharpened instantly. "Stay on the line. We're dispatching the nearest unit. Maintain a safe distance." I hung up, shoved the phone back into my jeans, and turned back to face the roaring bulldozer. Curtis stomped forward, his face flushed red. "You're bringing this on yourself, Luke. If you open the gate now, we might overlook the fine." I chuckled coldly. "Fine for what?" "This is my family's land, Curtis. You're just a bunch of thieves hiding behind paperwork." Behind him, the board members muttered uneasily. Some whipped out their phones to start recording the scene, but I didn't flinch. My hands clamped tight around the iron chain. My body blocked the gate. If it came to it, I was ready to lie down right here. They'd have to roll over me first. Suddenly, the shrill wail of a siren split the air. I turned my head. Flashing blue and red lights were speeding down the dusty road. I exhaled in relief. Backup had arrived. The sheriff's cruiser skidded to a stop in front of the ranch gate, kicking up clouds of dirt. Two deputies stepped out, one tall and burly, the other a petite woman with eyes as cold as steel. The male deputy stormed forward, voice booming, "What the hell is going on here?" Curtis quickly hustled over, waving his stack of papers. "Officer, this man is illegally occupying property that belongs to the HOA. We're carrying out a lawful repossession." The deputy snatched the papers, flipped through a few pages, and immediately frowned. He glanced over at me. "Are you the property owner?" I nodded firmly. "Yes, I inherited it from my grandfather. It's been in our family for over 70 years. Private property, never under HOA jurisdiction." The female deputy stepped closer, her hand resting casually on her sidearm, ready if necessary. The male deputy looked back at Curtis, locking eyes. "You got a court order? A legally signed and sealed eviction order from a judge?" Curtis stammered, Uh, Not yet, but we have board authorization. Before he could finish, the deputy cut him off coldly. No court order, this is trespassing. All of you, off this property, now. The air frozen. The HOA goons scrambled in panic. The bulldozer driver hurriedly shut off his engine and backed away. The trucks behind him deflated, like popped balloons. Curtis's face turned a sickly pale shade, his fists squeezing the crumpled stack of papers so hard the veins popped out on his arms. I stood firm, breathing deeply. For the first time all day, the ground under my boots felt as solid as it did back when my grandfather was alive. Before retreating, Curtis snarled, "You might have won today, Luke, but you'll lose the war. Willow Creek HOA doesn't back down." I just smirked. No need to say anything else, because I knew the real battle had only just begun. That night, my ranch was swallowed in an eerie silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, suffocating kind, like the sky itself was holding its breath, waiting for a storm to explode. I sat on the old rocking chair out on the porch, my grandfather's shotgun resting firmly across my lap. No porch lights. I deliberately turned everything off, partly to save power, but mostly to watch better if anyone tried sneaking up in the dark. I knew they wouldn't let this go. Those people, the ones hiding behind the name HOA, had tasted a humiliating defeat in front of the entire community council, and I knew Curtis Doyle's type all too well. He would seek revenge. And this time, he wouldn't bother, hiding behind fake rules. Around midnight, when the air grew colder and the cicadas started buzzing in the dry grass, I heard it. A small sound, barely there, but sharp enough to jolt my body like an electric shock, a faint scrape, like fabric brushing against wood. I shot up, gripping the shotgun tightly. Then, the shattering crack of glass exploding, a sharp, piercing sound slicing. Through the night, immediately, thick black smoke poured into the house. The smell of burning oil, melted plastic. I kicked the door open, coughing violently, tears streaming from the smoke's sting. Through the swirling haze, I saw it. A small fire crawling up the wooden wall by the window, spreading fast. They had thrown a Molotov cocktail at my house. Without thinking, I ripped the wool blanket off the rocker, dunked it into the water barrel under the sink, and slammed it over the flames clawing at the curtains. The fire screamed, spitting embers and choking smoke into the air. I battled it like wrestling a living beast. Every swing, every frantic smack of the blanket felt like fighting for my very life. My heart pounded wildly, my lungs burned raw. From the smoke, tears streamed freely down my face. It wasn't until the last flame hissed out, leaving charred black scars on the wooden floor, that I finally collapsed, gasping, adrenaline making my whole body shake. I stumbled out onto the porch. In the dim moonlight, I caught the flash of taillights disappearing down the dirt road. A small SUV, speeding away, tires screeching, kicking up a long cloud of dust. The bastards had firebombed my house, then fled. I lifted my phone with trembling hands and punched in 911. The dispatcher's voice came quick and sharp. 911, what's your emergency? I practically screamed into the phone. There's been an arson attack at 1745 Willow Creek Lane. Someone threw a Molotov cocktail at my house. Units are en route. Stay at a safe distance, she said, her voice tight and urgent. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights ripped through the night. A sheriff's cruiser skidded to a stop on the hard-packed dirt in front of my ranch. Two deputies, a young guy with brown hair and a Latina woman with a stare like sharpened steel, jumped out, hands hovering near their sidearms. They surveyed. The shattered window, the shards of glass glittering on the ground, the blackened scorch marks still smoking inside. The female deputy asked briskly, "Did you see anyone?" I nodded, my voice hoarse. "Small SUV, heading west, too far away to catch the plate." They documented the scene quickly and efficiently. The female deputy, Her name tag read Deputy Ramirez, leaned closer and said quietly, "If you suspect anyone especially tied to the HOA, make sure you name them in your statement, but without video evidence, it'll be hard to make arrests fast." I swallowed hard. Of course. I knew exactly who was behind this, but the law needed evidence, and they knew it too. They were scum, dirty enough to firebomb my ranch, smart enough to cover their tracks. When the squad car finally pulled away, promising increased patrols, I slumped onto the porch steps. The shotgun rested beside me. I stared out into the night. No car lights, no movement. Only the sound of dry grass hissing in the breeze. Alone, seething with a fury that burned hotter than any fire. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen across the fields, I found it. Nailed straight to my ranch gate, a single white sheet of paper, bold, messy black print. Final warning. Leave this land or face the consequences. No signature, no HOA logo, just a brazen, cold-blooded threat. I crushed the paper in my fist, feeling the blood pounding in my head. They had crossed the line, and I swore to the heavens I wasn't backing down. The next morning, as the first sunlight burned away the thin layer of mist, I stood at the old ranch gate, where they had nailed the threatening letter last night. I stared at the rotting wood, the nail mark still fresh, then lifted my eyes toward the endless stretch of fields. No one in sight. Only the wind. And that silence, the kind that chills the soul. I knew one thing. They would be back. And next time they wouldn't stop at just Molotov cocktails or cowardly threats. I needed allies. You can't defend a ranch with just an old shotgun and pure rage. You can't fight a crazed HOA mob with nothing but stubbornness. I needed people. Real people. By noon, when the sun hung high and a thin cloud of dust floated lazily over the dirt road, an old blue pickup truck rumbled toward the gate. It was Martha Jenkins, who lived on a farm 3 miles down the road, a woman near 70, but her back still straight as a flagpole. She climbed down carrying a basket. "Heard what happened last night," she rasped. "I thought you might need this." I took the basket. Inside was some homemade bread, a jar of honey, and, most importantly, an old revolver wrapped in waxed cloth. I almost laughed from sheer emotion. Martha patted my shoulder. "Your granddaddy once saved our home from thieves during the drought years. Now it's my turn." Half an hour later, old Henry Carter showed up too. Mr. Carter, my grandfather's longtime friend, driving a pickup that looked like it had been pulled straight out of a museum. He didn't say much. He just unloaded a coil of barbed wire and a stack of metal barricades. Then he pulled me around to the back of the ranch, and together we reinforced the barn doors and locked down all the vulnerable entry points. "While we worked," he murmured. "These HOA folks think their fancy papers can bury the graves of our ancestors, huh? They forgot one thing, Luke. Farmers out here are harder than rock." I just nodded, unable to say a word. My throat clenched tight. By late afternoon, Bobby Mills, a 17-year-old kid from the neighboring ranch, came pedaling up on his bicycle. Slung over his shoulder was an old baseball bat, his stance more determined than his years. "Dad says, if you need anything, just call," Bobby said, his cheeks flushed with emotion. "The old man says your grandpa's land is free land, not something to be sold off to a bunch of polo shirt parasites." I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in days. "Then I'll remember that," I said, clapping the boy on the shoulder. Evening, while I was fixing the floodlights around the house, another pickup rolled up. This time it was Tom and Eddie, the 2 goat ranchers from the West Valley, bringing a cooler full of cold beer, a crate of 12-gauge shells, and a big wooden sign painted in bold red letters. "Private property. Trespassers will be dealt with. No." Mistaking the message here. We sat around a small fire in the backyard, drinking beer and talking strategy. Old Carter took a long drag from his cigarette, resting his shotgun across his knees, and said thoughtfully, "You know those HOA rats aren't done, Luke. They'll fail this way, they'll come back another." I nodded grimly. "Then we won't fall asleep at the wheel. Starting tonight, we set up watches. We divided shifts, like soldiers guarding the last fortress. No one complained. No one faltered. There was a quiet, iron-hard determination settling into every heart. That night, standing watch from the rooftop, shotgun in hand, I looked down at the firelight dancing across the backyard and listened to the soft laughter of the friends below. And for the first time since this war with the HOA began, I truly believed I wasn't alone anymore. 3 quiet days passed like a ticking time bomb. No messages, no suspicious SUVs circling the ranch gate, just my watchful eyes, the shotgun in my hands, and loyal friends taking turns standing guard like old soldiers on a frontier. But deep down, I knew it was only the calm before the storm. Wednesday morning, while I was fixing the southern fence, the section someone had cut during the night, I heard the rumble of engines from afar. Not one, not two, but an entire convoy. I wiped the mud off my jeans, narrowed my eyes toward the main road. A tow truck was barreling down the dirt path, and hooked behind it was my old John Deere tractor. The tractor my grandfather had treasured like gold, now being dragged, chained, and grinding up the dirt road, spitting clouds of dust and rocks. Behind the tow truck was a pickup carrying Curtis Doyle, leaning halfway out the window, pointing, and barking orders like some 2-bit general. I felt my chest ignite with fury. They were stealing my property in broad daylight. Without thinking, I sprinted into the road, waving my arms, shouting at the top of my lungs, "Stop! That's my tractor! You have no right to take it!" But the tow truck just roared louder, dragging the stumbling John Deere toward the HOA's so-called temporary impound lot, a patch of stolen wasteland they claimed as theirs. The rage inside me exploded. Without a second thought, I jumped into my pickup, jammed the key in, fired up the engine, tires spinning, kicking up rocks and dust. I tore down the road after them. The wind shrieked past my ears. Red dust clouded my vision. The old John Deere bucked and bounced behind the tow truck like a child being yanked through the mud. I clenched my jaw. If they damaged it, if they snapped a shaft or cracked a wheel, I swore I'd make them pay. When they stopped at the vacant lot, I slammed on the brakes so hard my truck skidded sideways across the dirt. I jumped out, storming straight toward Curtis as he barked orders. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Curtis?" I roared, my voice shaking with anger. Curtis smirked and shoved a stack of papers in my face. "You violated HOA land use regulations. Machinery can't be stored outdoors without board approval. Therefore, we have the right to impound it." Violation? Approval? That tractor had been sitting on my ranch before these clowns could even spell HOA. I clenched my fists. "This is my land, my equipment. You have no right to touch anything." Curtis sneered. "We have it right now, and if you want it back, pay the $7,500 fine first." The blood pounded in my ears. I couldn't hold back anymore. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "Perfect, Curtis," I said, my voice low and steady. "Say it louder for the camera. You're stealing private property and demanding ransom in broad daylight, right?" Curtis flinched when he saw the camera. "Turn that off," he barked. I stepped back, keeping the camera aimed squarely at his face. "Welcome to HOA Patrol, everyone. Live proof of a corrupt HOA stealing from homeowners." Curtis lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but I dodged easily. He froze, his face turning purple with fury, hands trembling. But he didn't dare strike me on camera. I panned the camera around the lot, the John Deere chained like a criminal, the gaggle of board members shifting awkwardly. some looking downright guilty. After a few minutes of awkward chaos, realizing they were losing the upper hand, Curtis hissed, "Release the tractor." The HOA goons scrambled to unchain it, dragging the John Deere onto the rocky dirt lot like tossing out yesterday's trash. I gritted my teeth, but at least it was still intact. I climbed into the cab, turned the key. The old engine sputtered, coughed, then roared back to life, stubborn and proud, just like me. As I drove the tractor back to the ranch, kicking up a plume of red dust behind me, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about defending property anymore. This was a fight to defend what was right. And now I finally had the advantage. That night, as I sat on the front steps watching the sunset bleed red across the sky, I knew I had to change the game. I couldn't just keep defending wave after wave like some cornered animal. It was time to counterattack. It was time to strike, straight at their heart. I opened my battered old laptop and buried myself in research. Down in the basement, in a wooden box hidden away for years, I dug out everything my grandfather had left behind. Land ownership certificates, original boundary maps from the 1940s old correspondence between my grandfather and the county land management office. And then, amidst the yellowed papers, I found the crown jewel, a 1943 affidavit from the local government, officially confirming that our family ranch lay outside any HOA jurisdiction, therefore not subject to any of their regulations. Proof. Undeniable. Unbreakable. The next morning, I drove straight into town to the office of Harold Whitmore, an old lawyer famous across the county. He had a beer barrel belly and eyes sharp as a razor. A man who'd been taking down corrupt HOAs since before I was even in grade school. I spread the documents across his desk. Harold lifted his reading glasses, flipped through them slowly, frowning, then chuckled deep from his chest. "Son, you're sitting on a nuclear bomb, Luke." I clenched my fist. "I want them to pay. Not just for the tractor, not just for the Molotov cocktail, for everything." Harold nodded firmly. "We're not just going to make them pay. We're going to wipe this rotten HOA right off the map." Within 24 hours, Harold had a lawsuit ready. A civil suit for trespassing, property damage, and endangerment. Criminal complaints for attempted arson and unlawful seizure of private property. But he didn't stop there. Harold also contacted the local TV stations, who loved a good David versus Goliath story. 3 days later, the vacant field at the entrance to Willow Creek had turned into a media battleground. News vans, cameras, microphones, reporters swarmed everywhere. The American flag flapped against the gray sky as if the land itself had taken sides. I stood in front of the cameras, unwavering, and told it all. The land theft scam, the firebombing, the stolen tractor, the intimidation and attempted eviction. I held up the old land map, pointing straight at the faded 1943 signature. My family was here before this HOA even existed. We are the living history of this land, and we will not be erased by a bunch of polo shirt mafia. The news spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, the sheriff's office launched an official investigation. The county commissioner's office demanded a full review of Willow Creek HOA's legal status. Formerly, silent residents began coming forward, recounting years of bullying and harassment they had endured under the HOA's reign. That night, I got a text from Harold. "They're panicking." "Luke, they're turning on each other. And they're making mistakes. Keep recording everything. Victory is close." I looked up at the night sky, where stars burned bright against the darkness. I knew the war wasn't over. But for the first time, they were the ones afraid. The very first morning after the news report about my ranch aired across every local channel, Willow Creek woke up to an earthquake. No more sidelong glances like before. No more whispered conversations behind my back. The whole neighborhood knew the truth. And for the first time, they didn't turn their backs on me. They turned their backs on the HOA. Immediately after, the Sheriff's Department, in coordination with county investigators, launched a full-scale raid. That Monday morning, while I was fixing the new ranch gate my friends had helped install, a fleet of police vehicles swarmed into the center of Willow Creek, right where the HOA headquarters sat in their fancy clubhouse. Sirens blared across the sky. Red and blue lights flashed across the mirrored front of the building. Curtis Doyle, the man who once jabbed a finger in my face and screamed, "You're going to lose!" was handcuffed and led out of the building, pale-faced, stammering incoherently, as a pack of reporters swarmed him like a busted beehive. Right behind Curtis, one after another, Valerie, the sweet-as-poison secretary who buried me in paperwork, was escorted out for falsifying land records. Jeff Carter, the bat-wielding thug who once tried to intimidate me, was arrested for threats and property damage. Linda Foster, the woman who'd pretended to help with relocation, was under investigation for arson involvement and conspiracy. The press pounced like sharks in a feeding frenzy. Headline after headline flashed across morning news. Corrupt HOA exposed. From thrones to handcuffs. One man, one piece of land, and the fall of a corrupt empire. I watched the news, and for the first time in weeks of hell, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not an angry smile, but a true smile. The smile of justice reclaimed. Yet the victory wasn't just that they were arrested. The greatest triumph was seeing the community wake up. The people who once avoided eye contact now came to the ranch, bringing apologies, gratitude, and real help. Some brought new rolls of barbed wire to reinforce the fence. Some donated planks to help rebuild the barn. Young men volunteered to take shifts keeping watch at night. 1 week later, during an emergency hearing at the county courthouse, the judge ruled, Willow Creek HOA is hereby dissolved due to severe violations of both criminal and civil law. All HOA properties will be seized and liquidated to compensate affected residents. In Tatar, a single day, Curtis Doyle's little kingdom turned to ashes. The giant Willow Creek HOA sign at the main gate was taken down, thrown into the weeds like a rotting monument to arrogance. That night, as I sat on the front steps of the ranch, a cup of steaming coffee in my hands, Carter sat beside me. He leaned forward and pointed toward the ranch gate, where a new sign now hung. Jameson Ranch, established 1941. Private land, defended by will and blood. He chuckled. They picked the wrong opponent, Luke. You didn't just protect the land. You protected the spirit of this place. I nodded, silent, gazing at the stars blazing across the night sky. The HOA thought they could steal my family's legacy with fake rules and brute force. But in the end, they were crushed by the very things they could never understand: loyalty, honor, and the memories rooted deep into this land. Months after the Willow Creek HOA was officially dissolved, my ranch began to take on a new face. No more scorched black patches on the grass. No more threat signs fluttering in the wind. No more long nights of standing guard, eyes locked on the butt of a shotgun. All that remained was the land, free, pure, just as it had been when my grandfather first broke ground here. We, me, Carter, Bobby Mills, and the tight-knit neighbors, rebuilt it all, one board and one post at a time. A new barn, bigger, sturdier, with an American flag mural painted right on the front doors. A new fence made of galvanized steel with a wooden sign carved to read, "No HOA welcome, only honesty and courage." A small memorial next to the old oak tree, where I placed a stone marker etched with my grandfather's name, John Jameson, keeper of this land's soul. The day we finished raising the barn, Mrs. Martha Jenkins brought over a homemade apple pie. Old man Carter showed up with a dusty bottle of whiskey he'd been saving since 1980. For a moment truly worth celebrating, as he said. The entire small town gathered under the golden afternoon sun, laughter echoing across the fields. Bobby, the kid who once stood guard with a beat-up baseball bat, threw his arms around me and said, "Uncle Luke, your ranch is the best in the whole county." I laughed, ruffling his hair, and looked around at the hard-working folks with sun-scorched faces, rough hands from swinging hammers and digging post holes. They were the real heart of this land. Not the ones in polo shirts, not the ones who thought power lived on fake pieces of paper. That evening, as the sun sank beyond the horizon, I sat on the porch, a cold lemonade in hand. Beside me sat Carter, his shotgun resting across his knees, out of old habit. We sat there saying nothing. We didn't need to. We had fought. We had sweated. We had nearly lost everything. And we had won it back, through perseverance, unity, and sheer heart. In the quiet, I could hear my grandfather's words, ringing clearer than ever in my mind. "Luke, land isn't just the dirt you stand on. It's where your ancestors bled. It's where your memories take root and grow. Protect it. And it will protect you." He had been right all along. That day, as the last golden light faded over the fields, I smiled and tightened my grip around my cold drink. Not because I had simply kept a piece of property, but because I had preserved a legacy, with everything I had, with everything I was. This fight wasn't just about reclaiming land. It was a reminder to all of us. Freedom is never a gift handed to the cowardly. It is the reward of those brave enough to stand and never back down.